Okay, so this is the DC Hanna-Barbera team-up comics, where well-known characters like Aquaman and less well-known characters like Black Lightning team up with well-established, well-liked Hanna-Barbera characters like Jabberjaw and Hong Kong Phooey. They did like 4 or 5 of these, and these are the only 2 I got, and these were going to be a trial run for whether I wanted to get the rest of them or not, and I ended up not wanting to get the rest of them after reading these. The flaws that these have are very odd, and they're very particular. It's the sort of thing, it just kind of puts a bad taste in your mouth, even if you can look at it and say that on any individual page there's not necessarily anything wrong with it. It just kind of leaves a weird feeling in your mouth. And I couldn't help but compare it to this story that DC did a couple years ago, I think a year or 2 ago, where they tried to bring back the Hanna-Barbera characters, but they tried to do it in this really, like, sort of edgy teenage sort of way. Like, they took Wacky Racers, the old show about cartoon characters racing each other in stupid cars, and turned it into Wacky Raceland, which was this Mad Max-style post-apocalyptic future. It was okay for what it was, but it just felt kind of juvenile. There was also just a lot of really try-hard things in it. It's like the pink lady, what's her name? I'm blanking on it. It's been a while since I've seen that old show. But the blonde, attractive pink woman, it's like she was this like badass, ball-busting, bisexual, pagan. One of the characters was trans. Dick Dastardly went from being just a sort of cartoonishly evil villain to being this guy who cowardly let his wife and kids die. It was really edgelord. It was really out there. It was really, like I said, at the time, it just felt kind of juvenile. It just felt like a 13-year-old had gotten hold of Wacky Racers and just did the most out there thing he could think of with it. But I couldn't help but compare it to this, because in a way, the Wacky Raceland thing was way better than these 2 Hanna-Barbera things, because at the very least, the Wacky Raceland story was tonally consistent from beginning to end. It's like they were going full edgelord and full extreme, like the 90s or something, and they stuck with it the entire time. Whereas with these, it's not really in the style of the old Hanna-Barbera cartoons. It's not really in the style of modern-day DC Comics. It's sort of this weird in-between stage. They have their good, strong points, but then they have their weird negative points that just kind of detract from it. So I'll get into the Aquaman first. So the idea is that in Amnesty Bay, they see this giant shark in the water, and then it turns out that the shark can fly around and talk, and that's when Aquaman realizes that he's Jabberjaw. But Aquaman doesn't know who Jabberjaw is, but Jabberjaw comes from this future where humans and sea animals live together, and that sounds funny. That sounds like a good setup. And then that's when we get into the politics of it. It basically turns out that the city that they're from, that relations between the fish, the sentient fish people, which have been artificially enhanced, and the regular humans. Gosh, there's so many double-page ads. I just want to turn to a random page in the comic. But anyway, it turns out that the relations have been straining, that the humans have been putting down the fish, that basically it's increasingly unwelcome to be a fish in this future city. And it's all very obviously a metaphor for what Dan Abnett thinks of Trump's America. Dan Abnett, he is very liberal, but he can keep his politics tempered down when he wants to. But apparently this time he just really didn't want to. Instead of just telling a crazy story about Jabberjaw meeting Aquaman, we get this really weird thing about race relations in America. It's like, who was asking for this? The people who are old enough to be nostalgic for Jabberjaw, and I very vaguely remember Jabberjaw coming on Cartoon Network in the mid-90s. Most of the Hanna-Barbera cartoons, I really didn't watch much of them. At least the old classic ones. But I vaguely remember this one. It was like a Scooby-Doo style thing where Jabberjaw is in a band, and they go around in the band and they get into different adventures. And I remember how Jabberjaw talked more than anything. And sure enough, Dan Abnett actually does a good job of capturing how Jabberjaw speaks, even though in the comic he doesn't look anything like Jabberjaw. He just looks like a shark. And we get some funny moments like this, where Aquaman realizes that even 50 years in the future, he's still a joke. He never got any respect, which is Jabberjaw's catchphrase. So there's some funny moments to it, but it's like I said, the people who are going to be nostalgic for Jabberjaw aren't going to want to read that. The people who aren't old enough to be nostalgic for Jabberjaw, they're just going to want to read, like, I don't know, a fun comic too. And instead we're getting this treatise on on race relations. It's like, why? And that's the panel that it ends on. And it's just kind of mind-boggling why they thought that would be a good idea. And you may think, well, okay, that's one comic, but they did 4 or 5 of these. Well, from what I'm hearing on Twitter, all of them had elements of that. Some were better at it than others. This backup story about Captain Caveman, this one's okay. It's not bad. The art's a little bit weird to the point that I have a hard time telling what's going on sometimes. But it's not bad. But then we get to this one, Black Lightning and Hong Kong Phooey. This one doesn't have any of the weird politics about it that I was talking about. It's just this story of, and Hong Kong Phooey, I do not remember Hong Kong Phooey at all. I think I kind of vaguely remember a dog that could do kung fu, but I don't know anything about him. So I'm guessing this Professor Presto guy is from the Hong Kong Phooey show, and then he's teaming up with Cheshire and Bronze Tiger, which I'm a little bit surprised they put Bronze Tiger there. I would have thought that they were committed to making him a good guy nowadays, but apparently he's still, a Batman villain or whatever at this point. So it's Black Lightning and Hong Kong Phooey teaming up to stop Professor Presto from getting the God Fist. It takes itself very seriously. I will say that. There's very little levity to it. At least the Aquaman thing, it had a little bit of levity to it. With Jabberjaw, you really can't help it. But this one is like if you swapped out Hong Kong Phooey for Richard Dragon, you wouldn't notice the difference. Other than every once in a great while, somebody draws attention to the fact that he's a dog. But it doesn't get brought up very much. But you could put in, The Question or Nightwing or any other martial arts character in place of Hong Kong Phooey, and it would be almost the same story. I mean, it's not a bad story all by itself. It's just I'm kind of questioning why they even needed to bring Hong Kong Phooey into it. Maybe it would help if I saw the show more, because I really don't remember it. But so it's just really serious. And then we get to one of the worst things I've read in a while, the backup story. You may have already heard about this one, but it's worth going over anyway. So at the end of this, we have the Funky Phantom, which, once again, no clue who that is. But basically, and this one's written by Jeff Parker, the Funky Phantom, who I guess was a Revolutionary War Minuteman, somehow he comes back to the modern era, and they have this whole debate about guns with him. The whole thing is about them being a bunch of rednecks and how they don't understand their own constitution, and it's the whole thing from beginning to end is this political treatise on gun rights in America and the gun debate. It's like the Aquaman at least had a story to it. This is all it is. It's just them talking about guns. I don't who thought this was a good idea. I mean, is this the kind of thing Funky Phantom used to do? He would just make half ham-fisted political commentaries? I somehow doubt it. It's just really weird. It's like, why would you bother to end the comic on that? The comic up to this point, it had been this, kind of just straightforward old exploitation kung fu story, and then you're ending it on this? Once again, it's like, who is that for? It's not for the people that are old enough to remember Funky Phantom. You're not telling a story, you're just making a political point. So even people that wanted to read it, this is only going to appeal to people that are down with this point of view. So yeah, it's like, why would you bother to put this in print? I realize it's just a backup story, but it just leaves a really bad taste in your mouth after you read this, straightforward kung fu story. And it's like, what were they thinking? And I didn't read the other ones that they did. I can't even remember the other ones that they did right now. But apparently they all had that to one degree or another. It's just like, why did you do that? Why did you not just do the Hanna-Barbera characters just in a straight-up way. Right now, DC has the series Future Quest Presents, which I've done a couple videos about it. I actually really like Future Quest Presents. Not every issue is a home run, but they're basically just updating the Hanna-Barbera cartoons. They're not really making them tonally different. They're just sort of updating some of the situations, some of the looks, some of the ways that people are characterized, but they're not like completely changing the tone of it and the concept behind it and what the things are used to do. It's just like they're made for a somewhat younger audience, but it can still be enjoyed by all ages. Whereas these, it's just why? Why did they think that was a good idea? I keep asking that question because I don't have an answer. So yeah, it's really unfortunate. I really wanted to like this. I thought it would be, I thought these would be cool, but I don't need to feel like, put out by a comic book that I spent $5 on. And it's just unfortunate that DC decided to go that route. But anyway, tell me what you think. Tell me if you read these or any of the other Hanna-Barbera DC team-ups. In any case, this is Unranked Chevron signing off.